Ooh.
Awesome.
So
So yeah, can you hear me? Cool. So I wanted to welcome everyone to this AMA. What I was saying earlier is our guest today has gone through this process. He has gone through the job search process, which is something every single person is going to have to do, whether you're attending a boot camp now or you're preparing for one. And the advantage you have is the job search process to get a job in tech is nothing like you've done before. It's not the same as applying for a job after college or applying for a retail job. There's a formula to success. There's a formula to getting interviews. There's a formula to getting um, to to cracking the interviews and getting job offers. And the best part is my co-founders and I, we've gone through those steps. And David was one of the first people to take our advice and apply it himself. So he's on this call tonight to share that advice with you. Okay. I think Madini said she's ready for the Illuminati tactics. Honestly, there's no this workshop is not for people who want to cut corners, right? You're still gonna have to do the work. You're gonna have to send out a lot of emails. You're gonna have to meet a lot of people. But on this journey, as long as you don't stop, you only need one company to give you a job in tech. So as long as you keep going and you don't stop and you follow the formula, you are going to be successful. David, for people who may not know your story, if they're just joining it for the first time, can you share like a quick overview of what steps do you have to go to in order to become a software engineer at Amada Health?
Directly from the job search or just in general, transitioning from zero to hero?
I would say maybe attending the boot camp and then going through the job search and how many applications you had to send out, how many emails you had to send out in order for you to get your first job.
Yeah, so I graduated App Academy in March of 2018, so last year, and took me about 5 months to land my offer. Starting out, I just was sending applications online, and I probably sent around maybe 600 applications online. And from those 600 applications, I might have gotten like 10 interviews. And I sent around like maybe 300 emails. And from sending 300 emails, I probably got around like 40 to 50 interviews. And so what I started to notice was that the more direct you are with reaching out to people and companies that you're interested in, the more likely you'll get a chance to have an opportunity. And that's exactly what I did when I was applying for Omada. I was interested in a health space that I could go and help people. And so I reached out to Omada. They work in Rails and React, which is what I studied at my boot camp. So I emailed the VP of engineering for coffee. She agreed to meet with me. I told her my background of why I was interested in programming and becoming an engineer and stuff, and why I was interested in Omada specifically. And then she set up an interview for me, and here I am. Yeah. The rest is history.
Thanks. And I want to emphasize that you mentioned you send out 600 applications, and the conversion rate for the number of callbacks was about 10, right?
Yeah, very few.
Started emailing CEOs, CTOs, hiring managers at companies, and you saw almost like a 30% response rate.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that's not to say that it's impossible to get an interview from applications. Yeah. There's Alexis Carr was able to do that successfully, but from my experience, most of my friends or anyone I know who's gotten a career in tech got it through referral. 70% of jobs in tech come through knowing someone.
Yeah. Does anyone want to take a guess why the approach of sending emails works so much better than applying online? What are your ideas? And we want to make this conversational, so unmute yourself and please share your opinion. Why do you think sending out emails produce such a high result and response rate?
Yeah, exactly. I like what Madini said. emails are more personal.
More personal. What else, folks?
Hi, everyone. This is Stacy.
I see.
I think that first of all, I've heard they have like application tracking software that kind of knocks out a bunch of applicants. And also they take a few seconds to look at a resume, so it doesn't really tell a whole lot about the person. So
how many seconds do you think it is, by the way?
I think I've heard like 4 or 6, something like that.
Yeah, it's about 6 seconds.
Yeah.
That was a really great answer. There is indeed software that can be used to look for keywords such as JavaScript or Ruby or things like that. And if you don't see those things in resumes, they automatically just dump out your application, even though you could be an easily qualified candidate. Anyone else?
Folks, feel free to share if you're near a computer, turn on your camera just so this is more interactive. But what are other reasons why you'll get a higher response rate by writing an email versus applications? There's a few reasons. I think Stacy mentioned one, a good one. What are other reasons?
I mean, I think based on what we were talking about before, once people get to know you and they get your personality and they have a sense of you as a person, then you probably have a better chance of, making a good impression versus just a blank piece of paper where you're trying to present yourself.
Yeah. I mean, speaking from the other side, I get some emails from people from my boot camp, who want to reach out to me and learn more about Omada. And the fact there's about like 6 or 7 of App Academy alums in my company. The fact that they would want to reach out to me as opposed to anybody else makes me feel really special. And even if I can't necessarily help them get a job, I at least, want to share what we do. And if I can, I'll send a referral. It doesn't guarantee anything, but doing stuff like that motivates people in companies to want to help you out.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good ideas that people mentioned to combine and kind of tell you what it really comes down to, why people have such a high conversion rate is, first, it's personal. You're dealing with humans, right? Humans are decision makers at the end of the day who are deciding who's going to get a phone call, who's going to get an interview, who's going to get the job offer. So it helps cutting through the processes and speaking directly to a human. The second reason is by emailing a decision maker, you're bypassing the process that everyone else goes to, right? If they have an application, if they have a job description online, they're probably getting hundreds of applications a week. And so it's hard for you to stand out in that process. So you might be someone who's better positioned for this job in terms of your experience. But if your resume doesn't say that, if the recruiter who is evaluating your resume doesn't see the specific line on your resume that attracts them, they're not gonna call you back, right? But when you're emailing, most people are afraid of emails, so they just rather apply online. And it's natural at first to be a little hesitant to email people you've never met before, which is why we have these workshops, because if you can train your body to get outside your comfort zone and start meeting people who have gotten jobs by emailing other people, that helps you have this competitive advantage, this ammunition that you can deploy. And if you do it enough times, you are going to get callbacks and you are going to get opportunities. That's the key to this process. I dropped a link in the chat, and that link contains the initial video that our guest did. And today, this is the fourth part. And in the previous video, we discussed what companies people should apply to, right? How to find alumni of boot camps, how to find people on LinkedIn. So all of those videos are on our YouTube channel. However, today's meeting, we're gonna talk more about how do you tell your story? How do you, once you do get someone to respond, right? How do you tell your story in a way that appeals to the person, so they're actually excited to speak to you. Before we begin speaking about telling stories, what is the story that you all, or like, how do you envision telling your story when you're speaking to someone? Like, what are the main factors that you wanna convey in the stories when you're speaking to someone who works in tech? Anyone have any ideas? What are those main things you wanna come across?
Excitement.
So someone says excitement works for me. What are other, if you were in the shoes of the hiring manager, right, or someone who just got this email, what are the things that you would want to see if you were in our guest's shoes receiving that email?
For me, I like to, when I send out emails like that, like to recruiters or someone like that, I usually kind of research the company and talk about the company a little bit to say why I would be excited to work there. Yep. And then talk a little bit about my background and maybe how it could connect with the company and what they do. So that's what I try to do.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. That's exactly what I would do as well. I would try to tailor my story for each company and show how my personal background kind of ties in with some aspects of what that company does. And then just like you said, learn some research about what they do and why I would be excited to work there and what my skills could contribute to them. So I think that's a great answer. Anyone else?
Perry, Courtney, Antonia, what are your thoughts? Lynn, Chase, what are some of those things you want to convey to the people you're reaching out to? Haja, what do you think?
I think you also want to convey that you have the skills, that you're excited about it. Someone mentioned excitement. And also that you can work with other people, that you are, you know, that you feel confident, that you're able to work with other people, and you're excited about what you're going to do at the company.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think what you'll realize when you start going into the job search is that people decide whether they like you or not in the first few minutes of meeting you, right? People also they almost wanna take a bet on you, right? But you have to tell them the reason why they should take a bet on you, right? And so if you go into these meetings unprepared, then you're taking the risk that this person may or may not understand why they should be taking a bet on you. And when I say a bet on you, it might be an engineer taking a bet on you by taking your resume and pushing it forward to the recruiter. It could be a hiring manager who thinks, well, we should bring this person and have them do a phone interview. It could be the CEO of a company who receives an email from you and they want to send it to the recruiter, right? So at each stage, you should always ask yourself, one of the main things you want to ask yourself is, am I giving them a reason why they should be taking a bet on me? And what are those reasons that they might want to help me, right? What Stacy said about doing research, that's one of the best ways to convey that you're someone who took the time to actually like invest time in emailing them so they don't think you're just spamming them just like you're doing everyone else, right? That's why emails are so important. Once you start going into the job search and you're either doing phone calls with people who responded to you or you're doing coffee meetings, you gotta start thinking about signaling, right? How can you signal that you have the skills? What are the signals you want to convey to them ahead of time before this meeting even begins, right? If you're going into a meeting and you're trying to improvise on the spot, it might come off, it might end well or not, but you're not in control of that meeting. If you go into the meeting and you know what are the top 3 things you want to signal so it comes off to the person you're speaking with, then through stories, you'll be able to explain to them why you're the perfect person for this job. Okay? Some examples of signals, right? Because some people are like, what the hell are these signals? Some examples of signals could be maybe you did an open source contribution. If you're just starting out and you might not even know what open source is, basically there's a lot of code that's out there that's being shared by engineers. Examples of open source code is React, right? There's a lot of libraries, a lot of code that other engineers write. So when I decide to write my app, I don't have to write everything from scratch. I can just find snippets of code or tools on different tools and add it to my app, right? So if you can signal that you're someone who contributes to open source, right? That's something that a lot of beginners don't do, but it's actually something that's easy to do if you're just starting out. That could be one signal that you can incorporate into your story in order for you to make a good impression, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys have questions about that? I know this might be a new topic, signaling. What are the things that people look for? Does that make sense?
Adding on to that, you could also make like your own personal projects, because it kind of shows that you're not necessarily just writing code for a company, and that you are passionate about building things outside of work. So yeah.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about projects as well. Like, how do you just kind of work it into the conversation, or do you just send them a link to your projects? You know, how do you really, I guess, organically display what you want to about your skills without seeming kind of, you know,
like pretentious or something?
Right.
It's a good question. I don't know if I talk too much about my projects when I was in my coffee meetings.
Okay.
But if I were to, then I would probably do what you were saying and try to work it into my conversation somehow. Like maybe, let's say I know that Omada works in React, and I might ask them, like, obviously I can't know what you guys are building, but like, give me an example of some stuff you guys have been using React for. And then they could say something. It's like, oh, cool. Like, and actually one of my personal projects, I use React to do this. So you can do that.
Right. Okay.
That's probably how I go about it.
I would also say that one of the common questions that come up in interviews are like, what projects are you working on or you worked on, and what problems have you solved, or tell me about a problem that you solved.
Yeah, that's true.
That's something that's almost guaranteed, like 100% to come up in the interviews, right?
Absolutely.
And so going into the interview process, everyone should be thinking about, what project can I talk about? What interesting problems have I solved, right? And since many of you have months, maybe even 6 months before you actually get asked this question, this is the perfect opportunity to start thinking about interesting problems you want to tackle, so you have a good answer for those questions when they do come up, right? When you're doing these informational interviews, you don't have to wait for the person to ask you what is the biggest problem that you solve, or what are the projects that you're working on. You see, going into these interviews, you should already prepare a few examples and bring them up naturally in your conversations as you're speaking to them, right? Because these are informational interviews. They may not necessarily be evaluating you. Do you have this skill level? But if you're conveying to them that you're someone who likes building things, you like solving problems, that's going to leave a good impression on them, right? And you're almost volunteering this information and making it sound natural before they even ask you that. So they're like, oh, cool. Like, I was going to ask you that, but you just told me. So great. Like, I'm glad that you told me that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So Chase asked, what are some good projects to complete before interviews? David, you
Yeah,
want to tackle that?
yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, I think one of the most useful things I did in my boot camp, and if I weren't in a boot camp, I'd do the same thing, would be to, especially if you're going for web development, which is what I do specifically, um, is to create either a clone of a site of some feature, displaying different features of an app, or make your own website that does something. So you can demonstrate that you can build an app that's full stack, like back end and front end. For example, when the first project I ever made was, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Flickr, but it's basically a site where you can use, it's kind of like Instagram or something, where you can like upload photos and people can comment on it and things like that. And I really liked how the website looked, so I wanted to take a shot at trying to, obviously you can't build every feature of an app that's existed for tons of years, but you know, the core things of it, like image uploading and commenting and things like that. So I analyzed the app and made a kind of a somewhat replica of it, but I called it Bicker. So it's a bunch of pictures of people arguing with each other. And you can upload pictures, you can comment, things like that. And that was really fun because I got to learn a lot, like, you know, how to create different models about data that you want to do, how to present that for people to see. It gives you opportunities for employers to show off, like, you know, your stylistic, how you design a site and all sorts of things like that. And you can see the source code that's being used there on your GitHub profile. So if someone's an engineer in the company, they can see how you wrote the app, and they can see that, you know, you can write code pretty well. So I felt that was really useful. Some other things that I've done is I'm really into games of really any sort. So I try to make any type of game I can. I made an air hockey game that was just in JavaScript. That was really good because I love JavaScript, and any opportunity I can do to work with anything with it is great. So I made that, and I made a Connect 4 game that is in React. So I try to make things that are fun, but also are using skills that I want to get better at, and skills that are going to be used in places that I'm interested in working in. And that's kind of how I navigate it. Also, if you might say, because I've had this problem a lot, well, I don't have any ideas of what I want to build. There's plenty of places where you can go. You could literally just look up GitHub projects that people have made, and you can use that to get inspiration. That's kind of how I made that Connect 4 game, because I saw someone make a tic-tac-toe game, and I said, oh, there's actually a lot of complexities in tic-tac-toe. Let me try to take it up another notch and do Connect 4. And yeah, that really helped me. Anybody else have questions related to that or something else?
Yeah, and folks, one sec, Haja. I want to kind of encourage you to ask questions, because this is the environment where you can actually ask questions and fail, right? Because we're all here to help each other, and we also want to share advice that's actionable. So something that you can take and apply it to what you're doing, what you're going to be doing when we're not here. So please ask questions, because if you're thinking about something, there's probably someone else on the call thinking the same thing. And our goal is to make it so everyone wins and everyone benefits each other. And I'm going to pass it over to Haja, but I would love for our guests to answer questions, and for all of you to ask these questions to make the best of this time.
Go ahead, Haja.
So I had a question about like group collaboration projects. Is that helpful? How do the employers see that if you've worked with other people and you come up with a project? Are they thinking like, oh, we don't know how much you did? Or is that a good thing because it shows that, you know, you're able to work with other people and produce something?
It's a good question. To be honest, apart from like open source things, I didn't really, well, I did try to make one group project with two of my cohort mates at App Academy, but didn't go very well. But I think if I were to work on a group thing to for the purposes of like employers being interested in what I was doing, I think Timur hit the nail on the head earlier that open source is a really good opportunity to do that, because like with an open source project, like thousands of developers are working on something. So it's not really expected that you're supposed to carry a whole brunt of a project, but it's also showing that you're active in a community and are like interested to seeing what other people are doing. So I think it kind of gets the best of both worlds in that regard.
Got it.
I don't know if that helps.
Yeah.
I'm sure group projects do help. I just don't have a lot of experience doing them.
Right.
Looks like we have some questions in here. Courtney says, did you actually show the projects that you've done? When I was at App Academy, we had something that was called an App Academy Showcase, where a bunch of recruiters from different companies or App Academy alum would come to App Academy to see what we worked on. So we would have our projects on display. So that's where I showed it. Apart from that, occasionally when I would have coffee meetings, and every now and then if I were to bring up a project, sometimes people were like, oh, that sounds interesting. Can I see it? And then I'd show it to them. Thanks. But I don't really think when I would talk to people in conversation, I'd be like, hey, you want to see my project? I mean, I don't know. It just depends on the situation, really. But I usually let people see my GitHub. So if I provide them with that link, they can see everything I've worked on. So, well, that answers your question. Madney says, is it a good idea to personalize your projects? Made a Grand Theft Auto Online theme project. That sounds cool. And I'm thinking I might be able to represent it in New York. I think personalization is great. Honestly, I think the more creative you are, the better it makes you stand out, because anybody can make a copy of Flickr or whatever. And it's kind of like, you can think about it, this is how I view it, it's like tracing versus drawing, right? Like essentially what I did was kind of tracing it. When you're personalizing something, it's like you're making something completely new that no one's seen before. And I think that's more exciting in my opinion. So yeah, if I were an employer looking for someone, that would definitely stand out a lot for me. Perry says, should we be working on projects prior to boot camps, or do boot camps help make portfolios of projects? Well, I didn't work on any projects prior to my boot camp, but that's because I didn't really know a lot of programming before I started. App Academy did, part of its curriculum was to help you make projects to add to your portfolio. So I can speak for sure that App Academy does that. I don't know about all the other ones. If you want to be working on projects prior to boot camps, I mean, if you know what you're doing, I don't see why not. Like, if you can build apps, then nothing should be slowing you down. Let's see. Do I want to see your project? Yeah, you can send it to me. I'm happy to check it out. Hannah says, did you continue building projects coding after you're done with your boot camp? I have. I haven't been as super active as I want to be, but I do work on things every now and then. In fact, I'm actually trying to work on a mobile app next month using a technology called Flutter, because it seems really interesting, and I've never used mobile development, so I want to explore that. Apart from that, one of the projects I've been working on somewhat recently is I've been studying Japanese for half a year, and sometimes it can be a little annoying to want to look up something in Japanese and I can't type it because I have an English keyboard. There are ways you can switch your keyboard to Japanese, but I wanted to make a project to see if I could write in English and convert it to Japanese. So that's something I've been working on. Yeah. What kind of projects are the best to try to make? Like I said, making something, a full stack app where you can kind of see a website with a bunch of features. Like we could take Facebook, for example. Maybe you could make a replica of Facebook where you could have some users, they could have friends, They can make posts and things like that. So displaying that you know how to kind of isolate each feature in its own respective data model and show how to represent that data on the presentationally, I think is really useful because it kind of shows that you're a jack of all trades. Some companies only care that you're primarily full stack or primary front end or primarily back end. And that's fine. I myself prefer the front end, but I think it's more important to be a full stack engineer because one, it lets you kind of know the whole flow of how the web works better. And two, it makes you more marketable. You're not limited to just one option. So hope that helps.
Hi, David. I had a question.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what's your thoughts about trying to get into a tech company by while I'm still learning web development. So I was thinking about trying to get into a tech company by applying or connecting with someone to get into customer support or product support while they're hiring for those positions while I'm still learning.
Kind of like working your way up.
Yeah.
Interesting question. I mean, you could definitely do internships for sure. I know a lot of people who have done software engineer internships that have transitioned to full-time roles. I don't know too much about that space, but I can tell you that there was a guy I know at my company who was an engineer. He used to be a health coach, one of the employees in our companies. So he had no tech background, but he was already working in our company doing something like you're saying, like customer support or something like that. And everybody liked him. He was super cool. He told everybody that he was going to take some time off and go to a boot camp. He went to Hack Reactor. So when he finished that program, he let people know, or our company know, hey, I'm done with Hack Reactor. I'm in the job search. Would love to know if, there might be some opportunities. And they said, well, we really like you. We don't know if you're up to being able to take you on full time, but let's start you out just kind of as an intern position for 3 months, and then we'll see how it goes. And now he works there full time. So it's kind of like what you said. He was doing something before, so by doing that, he already had an in with the company, and then it made it way easier for him to become an engineer through that. So it's definitely a strategy you could do, I think.
Okay. What's the best way to find out about internships? Because some companies don't really put it out there. Should I reach out to hiring managers or recruiters and ask about internships? Do it that way?
I think hiring managers is a good way, but with anything, just email people, meet them for coffee, and ask them questions.
Okay.
Ask them, do they have internships? Or Twitter. Twitter's a good avenue too to reach out to engineers. A lot of people on Twitter will say hey, I'm an engineer at this company. Just DM that engineer, say, hey, do you guys have internships?
Okay, thanks.
Let's see. Perry says, my problem is that I thought HTML, CSS is enough. You definitely, CSS and HTML is good for the presentational side, but that doesn't really, that's not really the full extent of how the web works. There's a lot more that you need to know. JavaScript is definitely a big one. I would say that JavaScript is probably the most versatile programming language that's hot on the web development market. Pretty much every company uses JavaScript in some form, so it's definitely a good language to use projects for. I would say JavaScript is definitely a good one. Ruby is also a really good programming language. Python is another one, but I would say that you can pretty much do everything with JavaScript, back-end, front-end, mobile development. It's a great language. So if you had to choose one, that's what I'd go for. Adam says, can you provide a spoken example of an email you sent to an employer? Sure. I don't know if you were here for my last call, but I did share an example of that, and I'm happy to do it again. I can tell you the email I sent to the person in my company. So let me find it really quick. Okay, so I called the email coffee meeting. So I emailed the VP of engineering at my company. She knew my brother already, Ruben, the CEO, Career Karma. So I said, hey, I heard some great things about you from my brother, Ruben, and I linked his LinkedIn profile. And I wanted to know if you had a few minutes to talk about engineering opportunities at Omada. The reason why I'm reaching out to you in particular is because I noticed you used to be the VP of technology at Pete's Coffee and Tea. I go there all the time to study, to work on programming projects, which is great. For some background, my love for programming came after my time as a professional musician, when I realized that teaching music theory and math to small audiences was impactful, but I wanted to teach and share these skills at scale through technology. With that said, I'm confident to not only add to value to Omada Health with my experience with Rails and React and Redux, but also get close to my personal goals given Omada Health's mission of conquering chronic disease. Do you have time to meet for coffee at these times? I like to meet at Cycle Glass on 7th Street, somewhere in San Francisco, but happy to meet anywhere else if that works. Thanks for the kind consideration of this request. Look forward to speaking with you. That was my email. And then she set up a day later, she responded to me. I had coffee with her the next week, got an interview 3 days later, got the job 2 weeks later. Let's see. Let's see. Cool. Anything else, or I don't know if you want to add anything, Timur?
Yeah, I want to just add in terms of the priority of how people do these, how people approach the job search. The way you get better is by like taking a shot, right? If you don't take shots, you're never gonna get better at any particular activity related to the job search. And so initially, you're gonna be taking shots at emailing people and hearing a lot of rejections, right? But then you're gonna learn from that, and you're gonna learn how to tailor your emails, how to you're not gonna hear a lot of rejections. You might not hear a high response percentage, but you're gonna iterate, and then you're gonna get it to 30 or 40%, the same way how David got his, right? But he had to start somewhere, right? Then you're gonna hear back from them, and you're gonna start getting coffee meetings and phone calls scheduled, but you're literally gonna get on the phone and you're gonna just not know what to say, right? Or you're gonna say a bunch of things and you're gonna feel like you screwed up. It might feel like that, but in reality, you're just practicing and you're getting better and better, right? And you're gonna learn how to convert those phone calls into coding challenges. Then you're gonna be given coding challenges, and at each step in this process, now you're actually you're closing the feedback loop and seeing what works, what doesn't. And even with coding challenges, you're gonna mess up a bunch of times in the beginning, but you're gonna know what questions they've asked you that you need to get better at. The only way you get better at that is by taking enough shots, applying to enough companies, sending out enough emails, you see, and eventually you're going to be getting further and further into the funnel until one of the companies gives you an offer, right? And then it's a sign that there's other companies want you too. You now have done the legwork in order to get there. That's why in the beginning I was saying it's not a magic formula, and we're not teaching you how to cut corners. We're giving you a reproducible process. So going into it, you already know you're gonna get a lot of rejection. It's gonna hurt your feelings, but it's okay, because eventually you're gonna get to your end goal, right? And today, the best thing you can do is just start sending out emails, even if it's one email a week, to someone who went to your boot camp or a boot camp that you're considering, even if it's just one email. And over time, you build up the number of emails to 5 emails a day, like 10 emails a day, Eventually, it's going to be easy for you to write them, but you have to start somewhere. Yep. That would be my advice.
Yeah. And really quick related to that, out of curiosity, was anyone here from the call last week?
Yes, I was on a call last week.
I was just curious if anyone who was on the call last week, did anybody take the challenge of sending an email during that week?
I did send an email to a recruiter.
Oh, that's great.
It was someone I connected
Congrats.
with on Slack.
That's great. I'm glad you did it.
So.
Yeah. Let's all give Stacy a round of applause, because it all takes, the first steps are the hardest.
Yeah. I remember when I sent my very first email, I spent like 5 hours working on it. I wanted it to be perfect, so handcrafted. And, you know, they didn't respond. And I was like, oh, man, this must not work anymore. But then when I started doing it more often, I started getting faster. And I started learning, like, how to write things better that would attract more people. And then after a while, it just becomes a system and you don't even think about it. But it, just like with anything in life, the first step is always going to be the hardest. But once you're there and you're walking the path, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So congrats on making that first step. Cool.
Cool. Folks, we have about 10 minutes left in this workshop. What are some other questions that you have for our guests?
Congrats, Rosa. Hope your interview goes well. You got that. Let's see what Matsuni says. Reached out to a couple of seniors at Citrus who I knew from high school. This was months to years ago. I didn't know how to properly present myself to them at the time, so I made it very awkward and I wasn't able to get a job. How should I approach them now that I've raised the bar, but they might be skeptical of me? That's okay. I mean, trust me, I've had very, very many awkward interviews in the past. You just get used to it. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to a company that you've replied to in the past. As to how I would approach them, if it's been months to years ago, they probably don't even remember much of what happened at that time. So I would just approach them, just say, hey, I'm reaching out. I've been working on these things. I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. And I'd love to know more about what you guys do at Citrus and see, if there's anything I could contribute to, or I don't know, something along those lines. I would just basically express my interest yet. Again, I wouldn't say like, hey, I know I screwed up last time we talked, but I want to know if you could give me another chance. Just be like, hey, it's been a while. Want to know what you guys are up to. Would love to meet for coffee. Just take it from there. Let's see. How should you prepare for backend? I guess, I don't know. I kind of try to prepare for any situation. I guess when I was doing stuff that was related more for backend things, they tend to ask you a lot of algorithms. So with algorithms, some really good sites that I recommend, I'll write them in chat, are leetcode.com, codesignal.com, formerly Code Fights if you guys used it when it was called that. Codewars.com is another good one. These are all really great websites to practice solving problems. If you're doing LeetCode, I recommend trying that one first, because I've gotten a lot of interviews with algorithms that came from that site, and they're usually LeetCode mediums in my experience. Only once did I ever get a LeetCode hard in an interview level, and that was at Google, and it didn't go very well. So I would say most of the time, you could expect probably medium level problems from that site. The other two I'm not as familiar with, but I do know they're really good websites as well. Preparing for algorithms is good. System design is another really good, important aspect of interviewing. They might ask you, like, if you were gonna, design Twitter, for example, where you have like followers and posts and things like that. How would you structure? How would you architect like the back end of that? Like, what kinds of models would you have? Like, posts and users and things like that. How would you construct that to be used? So definitely system design. They might make you build something in the back end. I don't know. They might have like a front end thing where like you have like some presentational view that's trying to use an API to call something in the back end, but it's not built up, so you might have to write the stuff down there to make it link up and make it work. But yeah, I don't know. It can be really anything. I kind of try to just prepare for interviews for every situation, not necessarily back in the front end. And in those situations, basically algorithms, system design, learning how to build projects, under a certain amount of time. Obviously not like super crazy stuff, but know that like if you're just like, hey, build a small thing in like 3 hours, do that. Yeah, stuff like that. In my interview, though, it was a little different. We were pair programming, and I don't know how many people are familiar with pair programming, but it's basically where two people can be sitting side by side with each other, and they're kind of focusing on the same problem. So that way, it's kind of two heads working versus the problem. And that was a very collaborative experience. So in my interview, there was a bug that I had to fix, and basically the guys like work with me to figure out how to fix it. And so that demonstrated two things. One, do I know how to do something? And two, am I a good person to work with? So you may expect stuff like that too. There's another one I remember when I had an interview where you had like a bunch of code and just code snippets, like no app or anything like that, and basically scan the code and see how many potential bugs could be in it, or how you could refactor this code to be better and more efficient. So hope those examples kind of helped.
I have a question about like how you target the companies that you're going to apply to, because I know there was like a meme on Twitter passing around about the laundry list, and this is not a full stack developer. This is an entire IT department. So, and I know Timur mentioned that also, like they're going to have a long list of technologies, and you're not going to know all of them. So, like, how do you decide which companies to screen if you're not going to know everything? Is it like a percentage or,
Yeah. Oh, so are you asking more like, how do I decide companies I'm interested in, or or among the list of companies, how do I decide which ones I want to apply to? That one?
Right. But like knowing if you don't know all the skills, that's what I mean. Like if you don't have all the skills. Yeah.
Usually, so at Omada, I was fortunate because I did know what they were looking for. However, two things. When I was applying myself before I got Omada, if I saw like, let's say, if they had one of the two that I was familiar with, I was more inclined. So let's say like we use React and we use like Node on the back end. I was like, well, I don't know Node, but I know React, and Node is JavaScript, so I at least know JavaScript, so I could probably pick up Node. So I'd probably apply to there. Or let's say they said like, we know Rails, but we use like Angular JS on the front end or Vue. I was like, well, I know Rails somewhat, but I don't know Angular, but I know something, so I'll still apply to them.
Okay.
There's a person on my team who had a lot of experience in React, had never done Rails at all. She was familiar with Flask, which is a Python backend. Python code is very similar for Ruby, so she literally just spent like every day while she was working with us learning Ruby, and now she's probably better at Rails than I am. So like you can learn on the job. So like as long as, you don't have to even know anything. Like for example, I don't know if you guys aren't familiar with Jarek. He was like super gung-ho on like iOS development and all this, and he got a job where he had to use React Native. He didn't really care to learn JavaScript, but he demonstrated to his employers at the time when he was interviewing that he was a guy who knows how to solve problems, and if he knew how to do this is how he would approach doing it. So I think companies are really looking for I always say like, I don't think companies look for people who know everything. They look for people who can adapt to everything. Because when you're working, things are constantly being updated. But when I started working, React hooks weren't a thing. And then they just became a thing, and I've had to learn them on the job. And now they're super cool, and I know how to do them. So even when you start working in a company, it's not like, okay, I got these skills locked down forever. Things are going to change. You're going to learn how to adapt. So as long as you're not just like stagnating,
Mm-hmm.
you'll be fine.
All right, that sounds good.
Mm-hmm. Hope that helped. Internships, is it easier to get that route as opposed to going directly? Um, it's I never did an internship, but I do know some people who did and got full-time roles doing that. And I would probably say it could be easier, but it might take you longer to get a full-time job. So I guess it depends on how, like, what your clock is to become a full-time engineer. For me, like, I wanted it as soon as possible. So like I needed money. Like, I was living in San Francisco. It's not cheap there. So yeah, I wanted to get straight to the end. It probably would be easier to work your way up, but I guess it just depends on your personal preference. So yeah. Yeah, anyone else have questions? I think you're muted, Timur.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's almost time, so I wanted to kind of wrap up and leave everyone with some action items. Does anyone remember what the action items were last week? So last week, I basically put out a challenge to everyone who's on the call to at least write one email. But I know there were some people like Greg, there was Marcus, who said they were going to work together and send out their emails. They're not on the call tonight. But there is almost 20 of you on this call. And for us, we want to make sure that what we're teaching you, you're actually applying it. That way you can learn from it and you can get better. And so last week I asked folks to just post in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share. If you're planning on writing an email, how many people do you want to email? Just so we can all hold you accountable. So, and this email could be to a recruiter, it could be to another bootcamp grad, it could be to a bootcamp student that you're for the school you're considering. The main goal is not even who you email, but writing the email itself is a big step forward. So can people post in the chat how many emails are you shooting to do over the next week? Let's see. Okay, so Adam said he wants to send out about 5 emails this week, and Haja said the same thing, 5 emails. Okay. So 3 to 5 is also fine. Someone asked if these calls are weekly. So we have a job search workshop that's happening on a weekly basis now, on every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And the goal is to support people who are attending boot camps and are preparing for the job search, and people who are in the job search so they can begin getting a job offers quicker, negotiate, and get their first jobs in tech. Awesome. So there's a few people who said 3. Someone said 2. Stacy is gonna send out. She's gonna try to do 3. What I would encourage all of you to do is take a note of other people who are on the call tonight. Right? You can see people's names if you click on your screen, and reach out to them on the Career Karma app. Since all of you are part of Career Karma, you should be able to find each other easily. And based on the goals that people set in the chat, maybe you can collaborate. So if Stacy and Haja just randomly picking on you two, it doesn't have to be you two working together. But if, let's say, Haja's goal is to do 5 emails a week and Stacy's is 3, you can potentially like get together and say, hey, we're going to do like Monday night, we're going to send out 1 email together. So I'm going to be writing mine, you write yours, and we're going to hold each other accountable, right? And I think taking these steps, even though they might seem small, you're actually building new habits and new behaviors that's going to help you send out 30, 40, 50 emails per week a month from now. And eventually it's going to be just a matter of like weeks before you get a job. How does that sound, folks? Feel free to unmute yourself now.
Sounds good.
Okay, Stacy.
Yeah, I agree.
Sounds good. Scary, but sounds good.
Yeah. And that's what we do all along. We push you outside your comfort zone. So it feels scary. And everyone feels like that. For our next session, since we're going to have this session weekly, what are other questions that you have that you would like us to cover? Either topics, questions, or things that you would like us to cover related to getting jobs in tech?
Is it any different if you would prefer a remote position?
So I would say there's no difference. In fact, if you want to do a remote position, it's even more encouraged to follow the cold email approach. The reason for that is if you think getting a job in tech as an engineer is challenging, right? Most people want to get a job not just as an engineer, they want to work remotely too. And although it is definitely possible, Keisha Lake, who was one of our guests on the AMA, and we're releasing her podcast this week, she became a remote engineer at Stitch Fix. So it's definitely possible, but you need to be very deliberate and strategic in terms of identifying companies that hire remote engineers. And there's thousands of companies like that, but you need to be deliberate. Then you need to look at companies and find bootcamp grads who work at those companies as remote engineers, and then reach out to those people directly so you can build those connections. So it's definitely possible, and this is why we're sharing with you the overall approach of reaching out to anyone so you can cater it based on companies you want to apply to, like remote, in education space and healthcare space. It's up to you based on what your interests are. So I see Antonio, he mentioned whiteboarding and on-site interviews as one of the topics to cover. Does anyone else feel like they would like to see some of that on a Zoom call? Okay, I see Haja shaking her head. Rosa mentioned imposter syndrome during the interview phase. I think that's something that absolutely everyone feels and goes through as they're interviewing, right? The imposter syndrome is that feeling, thinking that you're not qualified for the job, and they're gonna see that you're not qualified, so you're gonna come off looking like an imposter. That's a great topic. And Adam brought up questions for networking meetings, right? If you actually go to a networking event, how do you build relationships so it's not transactional in nature, where you're just like, let me get your business card, or let me add you on LinkedIn, but you can actually build a connection. So those are all great topics. Oh yeah, Haja also, she's second that's how to navigate networking meetings. Okay. So let us connect. So David and I will connect after this workshop, and we'll make an announcement in terms of the upcoming workshops and what topics we're going to be covering. These videos are recorded, and you can find them on YouTube, and you can find the previous masterclass videos on YouTube as well. And I'm going to be making them into a playlist to make it easy for you to see the progression of all of the things you need to do. So far, did people find this meeting useful? Thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways. Was it useful?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we appreciate you joining. I want to just thank our guest for taking his time as he's traveling with his parents and his friends and family, jumping on a call like this. And we'll see you all next week. And if people can just send out one email, doesn't matter what stage you're at, even if you're very hesitant, or you might feel a little scared, and that's totally normal. Email our guest right? And intentionally, I'm not going to ask David to share his email because he did share it on other AMAs, but find a way to find his email and just write him an email telling him and connecting with him. And that could be your first email this week, okay?
Sounds good.
You said hey.
Awesome. Have a great night, everyone.
All right.
Adam, good seeing you. Rosa, Haja, Stacy.
Good night.
Hey, good night, everyone. Antonio. Good night, everyone.
Good night.